Greetings to you. I'm Keith Massey. Look what I have here. Pizza is an amazing combination of textures and tastes, affording one an almost limitless variety of ways to combine ingredients to personalize their experience. But where did pizza as we know it come from? More specifically, what is the origin of the word pizza? In this video, I will offer a new proposal for the etymology, the origin of the word pizza. I will suggest that pizza as we know it and call it is far older than previously believed, going back to the time of the ancient Romans. The origins of pizza in Italy. The earliest mention in literature of something resembling pizza in Italy comes to us from the Roman poet Publius Virgilius Maro, commonly known as Virgil. In his epic poem The Aeneid, a band of Trojan refugees led by Aeneas had earlier received a prophecy that they would know they had reached their promised land when hunger forced them to eat tables. After the Trojans land in Italy, first at Cumae, near modern-day Naples, they travel up the coast and are camped on the beach at the mouth of the Tiber River. Virgil describes them putting fruits of the field upon spelt cakes, which he further described as scanty bread. When they ate all of it, including the bread on which they had placed the other ingredients, Ascanius, the son of Aeneas, jokes, "Hey, we even eat the tables?" And then they realized that they had just fulfilled the prophecy. But note how the food they ate, ingredients put on a thin layer of bread and then eaten whole, does indeed resemble pizza. And it is intriguing that Virgil describes the Trojans eating this food immediately after they had spent some time in the area of modern-day Naples. Pizza in the area of Naples. The fact is, there are numerous foods around the world that are very much like pizza, meaning they constitute various ingredients served on a bed of some type of bread. But Naples claims to be the birthplace of pizza, called pizza as we know it. A very early reference to the food is found in the work of a Neapolitan poet named Villardiniello. The author nostalgically talks about the good old days when the pizza then seemed like the wheel of a cart. Presumably, he means that in his memory, pizza in the good old days was bigger than pizza was in the time of his writing. But the important thing, based on the analogy to the wheel of a cart, is that he is totally talking about pizza as we know it. The oldest reference to pizza. It seems certain, based on the information I have described, that a food like pizza, called pizza, was indeed invented somewhere in the area of Naples. But the oldest reference to pizza by that name is actually centuries earlier than Villardiniello. In a Latin language document dated to the year 997, we read how a food gift was to be offered in perpetuity to the Bishop of Gaeta on both Christmas and Easter, and this food gift included 12 pizzas. Duodecim Pizze. Gaeta is just 96 kilometers north on the Italian coast from Naples, and since these 12 pizzas are referred to in the context of other food items, such as a pork loin, there can be no doubt that the Duodecim Pizze here are indeed food. And there is no reason to doubt that they are indeed referring to pizza as we know it. What is very intriguing about this early reference to pizza is that the form of the word seems so Italian in the midst of an otherwise purely Latin text. And that brings us to the question of what Italian even looked like in the year 997. The double Z in Italian. Modern Italian words with a double Z derive from different original sources. For example, the word piazza, town square, comes from the Latin word platea. The Italian word puzzo, stench, comes from vulgar Latin putium. The important question for the word pizza, however, is what was the status of the double Z in 997? To answer this, let's look at some of the oldest archaic Italian texts we have, Dante and St. Francis. The double Z is attested in Dante, indeed, in the very first line of Dante's Inferno, in the middle of the path of our life, nel mezzo del cammin de nostra vita. The double Z there is derived from the Latin word medium, middle. But just a little earlier than Dante, the double Z is not attested in the famous Canticle of the Sun by St. Francis. St. Francis uses the word tribulatione in line 24 of his hymn. This word is abundantly attested as tribulazione with a double Z in later Italian before evolving into the modern tribolazione. What this means is that the double Z in the phrase Duodecim Pizze in 997 is quite peculiar. While superficially appearing to be Italian, could it actually be something else? An Italic etymology of the word pizza. Before the Romans spread out from their city-state to take over all of Italy and then the entire Mediterranean world, there were other peoples on that peninsula speaking languages other than Latin. To the immediate north, for instance, there were the Etruscans, whose language is still not well understood, but it seems unrelated to Indo-European. Elsewhere, such as in the area of Naples, the inhabitants spoke various dialects of languages which, while not Latin, are related to Latin through a common ancestor, in the same way that Spanish and French are both related by being descended from Latin itself. Linguists call this the Italic language family. In other words, Latin is just one language descended from a parent language that entered Italy in prehistory. Other members of that language family are known as Oscan and Umbrian, among some others. These languages are known to us in an unfortunately small sample of surviving inscriptions, but what we do have is enough for us to understand certain features of these languages. One interesting way in which they differ from Latin is that where Latin has a QU, as in the phrase quid pro quo, the other Italic languages have a P. So, for instance, the Latin word quid, what, is attested in Oscan as pid. Italic inscriptions have been found at Pompeii, which means that non-Latin Italic languages were still being spoken in southern Italy in the 1st century AD. They were being spoken in the area of modern-day Naples. Which brings me to my theory on the origins of the word pizza. I propose that the word pizza is actually of Italic, not Latin or Italian origin. I suggest that the word came about in the following way. The most central feature of the food in question is the ability to personalize it, to have it be what it may be. Whether you want extra cheese or not, whether you want pepperoni or not, your pizza can be whatever you want it to be. The Latin for the phrase, what it may be, would be quid sit. An ancient Italic inscription seems to attest the equivalent of quid sit, an inscription in the Pailignian dialect, which is closely related to Oscan, includes the words pid se. This has been interpreted by some Italic scholars to be, in fact, the equivalent of quid sit, what it may be. So I propose that what we know today as pizza was once called in ancient Italic and in the area of modern-day Naples as what it may be, a name derived from the choice of toppings. The two words pizze, what it may be, evolved into a single word pizze. A modern example of a food named after a merged phrase is the whatchamacallit candy bar by Hershey's. The sound ds easily evolves into a z. Think, for instance, how you actually pronounce the end of the word birds. Pizze became pizze and then pizze. While the word pizze was originally singular, it was misinterpreted later by speakers as a plural. Here's how that happened. First, the original Latin feminine plural ending would have been pizzae, but the Latin diphthong ae had begun to change to just e very early, evidenced by the fact that the word saipe often is spelled sepe in first century graffiti from Pompeii. Other words for foods have undergone the exact same transformation of starting out as a singular, being reinterpreted as a plural, and then generating a new singular form. Examples include the word cherry, which was borrowed from the Old North French singular form cheris. Once the singular word cheris was misunderstood as the plural, the word cherry was created to be the singular form. Similarly, the Old English word for pea was peace. The plural was pessen, just as we have child and children. But then peace was misinterpreted as a plural, resulting in the creation of the singular word pea. So the exact same thing happened with the word pizze to create a singular form pizza. I've shown that the oldest attested instance of the word pizza in 997 can be explained as coming from a merger of the Italic words that would have meant what it may be. And we've noted that Italic inscriptions have been found at Pompeii, which means that non-Latin Italic languages were still being spoken in the area of Naples as late as 79 AD. The question that remains is whether an Italic word for a food, let alone the food itself, could have been passed down for another 900 years. The fact is, words for foods are surprisingly stable. When people adopt a new food from another culture, they ordinarily keep the original name. I mean, the proliferation of ethnic restaurants is proof of this concept. You go to a Mexican restaurant and eat a burrito. You go to an Indian restaurant and eat tikka masala. You go to a Chinese restaurant and eat General Tso's chicken. Well, actually, that one was invented in the United States. But my point is, we generally don't rename foods. And that's why it would make perfect sense for that flat bread, put whatever you want on it, food from Naples, would still, for centuries, keep its original Italic name. But let's acknowledge an ancient example of this concept. The Latin word for cheese, caseus, was borrowed by the ancient Germanic peoples at some point prior to the 5th century AD. Since they apparently did not know how to make what we know as cheese prior to encountering the Romans, they borrowed not only the expertise but also the name of the food. And the word persisted in the Germanic languages so that today the word for that delectable product in German is Käse. Our English word cheese is also derived from the Latin. The survival of the Latin word for cheese in Germanic languages would be equivalent time-wise to the survival of the Italic word for pizza in the area of Naples. I believe that my research has shown that the people in the area of Naples could easily have passed on for hundreds of years not just the recipe for an ancient flatbread with toppings as described in Virgil's Aeneid, but also the ancient name for that food, which preceded even the Romans themselves.